All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us for this month's Emerging Technology Community of Interest meeting. So Pete Tseronis and Sam Navarro have a great program set up for you today on the rise of smart buildings. I'm going to give you just a very quick, perhaps 2-minute overview on the COI itself before we get started. So as I share my screen. Okay, so as I mentioned at the outset, this is the Emerging Technology Community of Interest for ACT-IAC. Really happy to have you here, whether you're in person or watching this recorded after the fact. Just by way of background, the Emerging Technology Community of Interest has a number of different working groups that are a part of our scope. And so we take interest in all of the normal things that you're seeing out there, both in the agencies as well as industry and the news these days when it comes to artificial intelligence, blockchain. We've got a group that focuses on DevSecOps. And of course, here today hosting this meeting is the Smart Cities and Internet of Things Smart Infrastructure Working Group with Pete Tseronis and Sam Navarro. So just at a high level, one thing that might be helpful for folks to know about is that we do periodically have opportunities across the COI to get involved, whether as a member or on the leadership team. And so just so happens right now, we've got a couple of vacancies. If you're interested, please don't hesitate to reach out to Pete or myself. We've got a vacancy for a government co-chair at the overarching COI level. And we also have a vacancy most recently for an AI government chair for the AI working group. I believe they're about to do elections to cover that. But needless to say, as you look at these different working groups that we have, know that they all meet on a regular basis. AI working group, blockchain working group meet every Friday in the morning. The quantum knowledge group meets once a month. DevSecOps does as well, and so does Pete's group here with Smart Cities. So that being said, I don't want to hold this up too much longer. So Pete, I know you have a great set of programming with us today and some great speakers, so I will hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Rob and Fred, and of course, Tim Gilday. And I mean, it's nice to have Sam Navarro here as well, who's kind of quasi co-host, but also subject matter expert. My name is Pete. Just a little bit of background on me. I'm a former CTO at the Department of Energy as well as Education. The Internet of Things, smart cities, we'll get into the technology side of it. But today we're going to really dive into, we hope those of you who registered and read the abstract that understand how buildings, commercial and government facilities, that is, are representative of the 16 sectors. They're one of the 16 that are defined as critical infrastructure. We think of energy and we think of the power grid. We think of transportation systems and cars and planes. We think of manufacturing sectors. Government facility and commercial facilities really are the foundation of our smart city discussion. Buildings are part of cities. Cities are connected with communications and lots of sensors connect. And we're going to dive into some of that today. But again, to remind people, smart buildings and the Internet of Things are transforming the way we live and work, whether it's an IoT sensor optimized building performance, energy consumption, and or maintenance schedule. IoT-enabled smart buildings can encourage sustainable behavior, analyze equipment performance, improve safety, security, and foster a more connected and productive work environment. We will dive into some of that. Today, I am joined by amazing folks who I'm going to learn from. Our goal is to educate, inform, and enlighten you. But today we are here with Sam Navarro, who's in the upper right-hand side of my corner. He works at the General Services Administration for the Centers of Excellence and is the Director of Client Services. Great to see you, Sam. Shout out, you're on mute, but I think, okay, we're going to roll with, I'll do all the intros first. That's always that weird break for me. Ashlie Ellison, Director of IoT Solutions and Connectivity at Verizon Business. Great to see you, Ashlie. And Charles, also known as Chuck Hardy, the architect at GSA-Public Building Service. Folks, we hope you can tell just by these folks, their titles alone, that they represent the pieces of what a smart building and what it takes to build, construct, engineer, if you will, something that we can go to and feel safe in every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Sam. Sam, a little bit of background on you, who those for those who don't know you, a little bit about why this is such a passionate topic for you. Then we'll go to Ashlie and Chuck.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us in today's panel. And as Keith alluded to, it's a really important topic for various reasons. When we think about how the workspace has evolved since pandemic, a lot has changed. A lot of folks are hybrid or dynamically integrated in different ways. And we want to make sure that we're driving sustainability in smart buildings, but also productivity. And the intersection between the mission, the technology, and the value proposition of sustainability is what we're going to be elevating to the surface today. So we hope everyone gets a little piece of value out of the conversation. Thank you, Ashlie. Thank you, especially Chuck, who's extremely busy, for joining us today. There's a lot of concepts we're going to dig into, like what's a workplace innovation lab? And probably some of you may have similar concepts within your organizations that Chuck was the critical architect in rolling that out within GSA. And we've just been kind of a innovation sphere within work buildings and smart buildings for the entire federal space here. So Chuck, thanks for joining us. And then also we have a critical carrier with us as well, Ashlie and Verizon. So looking forward to the conversation, Pete, and I'll turn it back over to you and our other panelists.
You got it. And for everybody who's joining on seeing our participant count jump tremendously, we're recording. You haven't missed much. We're going to encourage questions through the chat. And then with the last 15 minutes, we're going to have some live Q&A. Ashlie, Ellison, let me just say one thing. Ashlie, I'm a big fan of Spectrum. I ran a Spectrum program in government. If we don't have Spectrum tuned right, framed properly, nothing communicates. So the most fundamental piece of critical infrastructure, in my view, is that communication component. But welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, everyone. Hi, I'm Ashlie Ellison. I work with Verizon Business Group. Product management, specializing in IoT connectivity and IoT solutions. So when you think about the solutions world, you think about asset tracking, you think about smart buildings, smart cities, fleet management, utilities. It just kind of spans the gamut. Use cases that we see in and out every day with customers anywhere from Fortune 500s all the way into the government, state, local, education, universities. It's just all over the gamut. Everyone is interested in IoT, and the beauty of IoT about how flexible it is. It's not like building an infrastructure where you're designing a network of interconnected applications that require an IT focus. It's very OT focused, and it can layer on top of a network, so it can leverage existing networks already in building, or it can come in as a new building and be thought from a ground floor up. So you really are in a brownfield, greenfield environment when thinking about IoT. Happy to explore, happy to be here, and happy to kind of share my knowledge of IoT with the group. I see it all.
Hey, Ashlie, this is amazing, of course, to have you. And it's just so nice to get that discussion that is not so much about compliance, which is important. Sam knows better than anybody, as well as Chuck and myself, but the art of the possible, balancing risk, balancing innovation. And I will just have to say, because you brought it up, folks, be thinking about those listening. Ashlie mentioned asset tracking. Wireless or wired, but think about the wireless Internet of Things. The things are the devices, the billions, if not trillions of things that are connected. There is risk if not architected properly. And with that, I'm going to segue over to our architect, Mr. Hardy. Great to see you, Chuck.
All right. Thanks for having me. Great to join this conversation and these folks. I'm the chief architect for GSA from the building side, not the technology side. Focused on what goes on and what and how we design buildings. And so when you look at IoT and you look at the opportunities there, as Sam mentioned, we stood up a workplace innovation lab just to start to tap into some of these things that are coming online that deal with occupancy, that we're looking at how do you keep track of that, dealing with indoor air quality and customer experience in space, all those kind of things that we can tap into that just makes coming to the office a much richer experience. And the surge of innovation over the last 3 years within technology has been very responsive, I think, to the consumers and to the end users. And so how do you incorporate that into and marry it up with the return to office and how folks are starting to work in different ways? leveraging, I think, both the hybrid environments that will not go away. So we're going to have more noise in our office. How do we deal with that? But how do you make it seamless? How do you make it one button away and not six steps kind of thing? All that kind of stuff that makes it easy on the end user, but from the data and the analytics we collect makes it really super great for us to design appropriate space to change. And as an architect, typically we're looking to put in place now, like technology does, agile and flexible solutions. And so how do we do that in the built environment that allows it to adapt in ways that is informed by technology, informed by analytics, but makes that space usable in a very favorable way? But looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. We've already started it. And one of the rules of the road when I get to moderate is everybody can riff off one another. There isn't a set of questions or a set of questions. But I just want to comment, Chuck, on the what you said, or what should I say, what you referenced, the technology side. We in government know about enterprise architecture 101. We architect, we do our due diligence, we invest, and then we implement a tool, a service, a solution. And it's not plug and play when it comes to buildings. I think of an ecosystem of a city and the connectivity, to Ashley's point. And Sam, you mentioned the people aspect, right? Like, we're going into these facilities, we want it to be more than brick and mortar. And then of course, Chuck, you're right there at the beginning, saying, hey, I may not be the technologist, but hint, hint, he is, folks. How do we design buildings? How do we take into account working with some of those solution providers today? And that's a big part of our discussion, is partnership and collaboration. And yes, I will joke that it took a while to find somebody in PBS who wants to talk technology, but also bring to bear the discussion of smart buildings. So we are very, very lucky to have Chuck Hardy here, and shout out to Sam. So let's jump right in. I described what was written somewhere in some government document. What is a smart building? And anybody who sells into the government or provides services, having an understanding of whether it's a sensor, whether it's a process, whether it's a standard, we have a lot to take into account. 5G just doesn't turn on. Devices, again, don't just work when you plug them in. Sam, you talk a lot about the workplace and it being a productive environment, whether it's that digital divide concern. Can you speak a little bit more about that, what you're seeing in government post-pandemic, that we realize a lot about, hey, to connect people, there's an equity component too.
Yeah, 100% agree, Pete. I think a lot of times we think of smart buildings and only how it could address a specific vertical. And in particular within government, we think about potentially only within our specific agency. But there's so much other value that can be driven just by a lot of these use cases to many other verticals. And one of the examples that we were talking about was how it can help bridge the digital divide and bring quality spaces, not only within a work environment, but also within an education environment, right? And also within a health environment. We just had Dr. Osborne, who was out in Palo Alto in a VA medical center, right, supported by Verizon as well. And he kind of highlighted to us within the community of interest some of the just critical technologies that now they've been able to leverage just by smart building capabilities. And then also tying in a lot of these other compliances that we're trying to drive, not only by equity, but accessibility as well, right? 508 compliance within a lot of these buildings is now a lot more streamlined, whether it's by making sure that you have readily available tools within a meeting space that can be utilized from people who may be disabled or disadvantaged in a specific way. That's all integrated, and as Chuck said, is one click away now from being able to be accessible to folks who need that technology to collaborate at the same level that we do in a regular basis. So it's been enhancing our ability to think outside the box, but also thinking outside of the box in terms of scalability. And then last but not least, and I know Chuck could speak to this, a lot of federal buildings are in areas that aren't as populated or saturated as Washington, DC, or a Chicago, right? And those areas are still running on old infrastructure, right? I'll let Ashlie talk about some of the challenges with TDM, right? And us trying to move more towards faster broadband technologies within these spaces, right? Enhancing these federal buildings that sometimes are the one building that meets all the needs for the citizenry in that area, right? From a federal perspective, enhancing the experience of the citizen going to these buildings and the workers that utilize it, add to that business case, right? For carriers like the Verizons of the world to bring in more bandwidth that then also enhances the experience for the regular citizen in terms of equity, right? And making sure everyone has access to high-speed internet across the board.
Thank you, Sam. Let me jump to Ashlie, and then, Chuck, it's kind of going to be a segue back to you, because I'd like to ask you, Ashlie, I read a really good piece of Verizon Perspective titled, "What is a Smart Building? How to Make Buildings Smart with IoT?" And it was really just one of those enriching reads that says, yes, this is not hard to understand. It's just not the easiest to implement, because there has to be the mindset. The infrastructure can't be so old and legacy that requires a capital expenditure before you can drop. So can you speak to just that process, you working with whether it's commercial or government clients, to Sam's point of how do you get the conversation going to the point where you're also setting expectation? And, folks, think of the building Internet of Things, HVAC, heating, lighting, security, energy management, cloud aside. Yes, there's always a cyber threat, but how do you get the conversation going? And maybe you have an example or a use case you could reference.
Yeah, it's usually driven off efficiencies. So it's really listening to exactly what the building or the smart building or even the property owners, anywhere from university to state, it's kind of the same common denominators of what's driving this. I need to make my energy bills more efficient. I need to be able to maximize the staff I have in order for them to be able to remotely monitor. So if you manage multiple campuses or multiple buildings, you can imagine what the cost structure looks like to employ or to staff people that just basically their job is to go and monitor. Maybe they go into one building, they're doing a reading from an HVAC, then they go into the next one, and so on and so on. And how do you harness that so that you can remotely monitor? And you can bring that intelligence back into a visualization that you can then see historical trends. So then you take it the next step further and you start to see, I'm starting to see a maintenance problem. Maybe a weather event triggers, an outage in an HVAC unit or a boiler that, you're not going to replace because it costs millions of dollars. You're not able to tap into because it was built in, the 90s or beyond. Where you want to add sensors to it to pull back that data so that you can remotely monitor. And imagine having a screen in front of you where you're able to see the performance of all this equipment across all these different buildings, and then the intelligence that starts coming onto it. Maybe I need to have parts and pieces in stock ready for a repairman rather than, it's down and it's out. I mean, there's nothing worse than from a staff walking into a building and having the HVAC system down or it be too cold or too hot. Nothing encourages you more to just want to leave that building and not come into the office when the environment in it is not managed properly. And that expense is spread across so many different resources, from building maintenance to procurement to beyond, and how that data then becomes matriculated into other areas. So it's not just the building maintenance person that's staring at the screen. It's the procurement teams that are able to make sure that they have the right parts on staff. It's these HR making sure that they have the right people, in the certain areas. It's being prepared for when a weather event may cause breakage or other problems. It's seeing those trends in that data that really taps into that and then matriculates into the different environments, becoming more than just I need to operate something, but then how do I become more efficient? How do we become more effective? And then into the compliance and security world.
So Ashlie, I'm going to come over to Chuck. I was writing, and it's my thing. I learn as I listen, and you just taught me a good bit and also made me feel pretty good. You mentioned efficiencies and workforce to Sam's point about, there are new tools in there. I mean, I have a thermostat in my house and I still think it's cool, but I rarely use the app or know what it can be doing for me. I still go up and touch things and I'm like, hey, I could change this, that, and the other. But the trending, the visualization, the remote versus in-person. Everybody on this call should think a lot of people don't have that remote access, and people are going out and inspecting buildings or inspecting the grid or inspecting a railroad to have remote connectivity and securing it. You nailed that. I think of resilience and I think of reliability, and I appreciated you mentioning the cyber physical element of systems that have to be put in place to enable that. So Chuck, our architect, comments on Ashlie and Sam's comments.
No, I think everything that's going on now is leading toward not necessarily the remote management, but it's the proper management of the information we have. In the design and construction industry, we're moving toward digital twins, as we call it, and that's basically is a digital version of something either designed or intended or something that's actually built. And by having that digital twin, we can run simulations, we can do integrations, we can do testing and maintenance, and see what it's like in a digital world before we're actually doing it in the real world. And so those kind of tools that are out there are starting to become mainstream in design when we're working with something with BIM and Revit and those things, are just pulling it forward and then carrying the model forward. And that's, it's a heavier lift than it sounds, because you have to have people in-house that can manage that and take care of those digital twins as you keep going forward, and buildings change and people change and all that kind of stuff. But the advantage of things like that start to open not only the efficient operation and the effectiveness of the buildings we have, but it informs that next building we're designing as well, because we have richer information going into it. And then you look at some of the just the standard, you mentioned your thermostat. We've got bidirectional electric vehicle chargers in the Workplace Innovation Lab. We actually replaced one of the wings with power over Ethernet lighting, which tapped into not only the automated shade controls that worked with the daylighting, but also was power sharing with the building, because we were generating power for those lights off of films we had on the windows that were, and this is where you get sustainable, they were made out of recaptured waste from the oceans, printed with organic ink, and pulling not only the sun to power those lights, but actually getting power from the lights themselves, bringing it back in and turning it back into power. So the whole circular economy of energy was operating there for people to see, while avoiding just tons of embodied carbon that we would be putting in the conduit and things like that, versus just going internet cabling. So all those kind of things are, how do you take it to that next level, get it into appropriate applications of where it makes sense, and making sure when you talk about digital twins that the reliability of the information's there. But once you do that, the richness of that and the impact that has on decisions and paths going forward, not only for the building you're using it on, for other buildings, it's just great.
Well, Chuck, let me stick with you for a minute, because you kind of just, intentional or not, I'm going to take an unintentionally showed off your geek moxie. Okay, you're using power over Ethernet discussions, digital twins. I love it. How do you engage in PBS? You're not the CIO. Who are you working with in government or in industry? Is it, you must be pulling in some of those technologists saying, here's the capability we need or want, or more importantly, here's what we want our building to look like, the materials, make it work from a technology standpoint. And then we'll maybe have Sam comment on some of that.
Yeah, I think, and there was a question about in the chat about when a digital twin gets created. It can be either before or after a building's created. It can be at any time during the process that you can create one. But the partnership, our architects used to be, I don't want to say siloed, but we were siloed. We knew everything. We could do everything. And we're living in a world now where we're bringing in the CIOs in the house, but we're also bringing in the Chicos. So we're having a human capital conversation as well as a technology, because what we're trying to do is get people to make informed decisions. They may not always be the decisions we want, but we want to give them the information they need to say, if you do it this way, you can have this. If you're working off this program, these are the kind of pieces and parts that enable that program. If you choose not to, you're going to lose some of the capabilities of that. And so having those kind of conversations, I think furthers it along. And then this has been a conversation for the ages, is interoperability. The closer we can get to interoperability on many things, the easier it is to implement, but also the rich and the linkages of those thousands of hundreds of thousands of IoT devices are out there to make sure they're all playing well together and we can actually harvest the information. So all those kind of things are slowly filtering into the industry. And we haven't talked about AI yet, but that's another one that's out there that has architects worried because everybody thinks, well, it's going to take away their job. So we can AI a building from scratch. Well, you can't. But there are certain routine things that they can run and look at and do algorithms around to figure out what some of the options are. Again, informed decision making, but it still comes back to that human to do that. And as we play in all these things, as we play in digital twins, as we play in and work for it to determine the business solutions we want to use, it is that cybersecurity. It is a close connection with the CIO's office to make sure what we're doing is completely aligned with our policies, our procedures, our security needs and everything else. So we're going forward in a smart, safe way, because on many of these issues, and this is probably not even just technology, it's everything. If you go forward too fast and you screw up, it typically sets back innovation a couple of years because like, see, it didn't work there. I don't want to do it until it gets figured out. And so we're going forward in an aggressive way, but a measured way, in a responsible way.
Hey, I'm going to pull a sidebar, or not even a sidebar. I'm going to call a timeout. Sam, I'm going to come to you, but I see Ashlie like nodding her head, and that's like she's jonesing to say something really quick. I love the interoperability, Chuck. I love that you talked about, this harvesting of data. Folks who are on the phone or listening in, I mean, data collection, real-time monitoring, advanced analytics. If you do that sort of thing, you can apply that to building modernization, and IoT is a component of that. I like to marry mission to capability. The key is to know the mission, and anybody on this call will probably have a newfound appreciation for, buildings are really, really, really in vast quantity. Maybe I can apply my cloud or my AI or my solutions to that. So Chuck, you're the man. Ashlie, what are your thoughts?
Oh my goodness, my brain's on fire. I would say that, I see it all, whether it's occupancy in a room and whether or not it's used, the efficiencies driven by lighting, as mentioned, the efficiencies driven by whether or not this space is used. Usability becomes a key factor in data that you find from IoT. Understanding if the machine is being used, is it being used properly? Creating that digital twin by dropping sensors on either equipment that can't be tapped in through their PC or Linux, and the data actually pulling directly out. So when you're creating a digital twin of it, you're just making a remote monitoring capability. You're pulling all of that analytics off of that machine that you normally would walk up to. Normally there's like an LED screen, you're visualizing, it says that there's an error, et cetera. You're pulling all of that information into a cloud environment that you can visualize in analytics. When we think about digital twins, it can go anywhere from, not only am I just managing equipment, but I could be managing a floor plan where I see the sensors that are inside office spaces or meeting rooms and the data that comes off of that. So it could be a digital twin of a floor plan, a building, a campus, or all the way down into a specific piece of equipment. So think of digital twinning as I'm recreating a landscape of things. And that's the beauty of IoT.
I love the landscape of things. That's another wonderful acronym. If it isn't being used, trademark it, the landscape of things. No, appreciate it. And again, I'm hearing, and Sam, I want you to, talk a little bit about the innovation lab, because, the art of that possible, a lot of consideration has to go into it. And again, it's Verizon coming to the table and saying, we can meet your requirement. What problem are you trying to solve? That's what I'm hearing, Ashlie. And to also, if I'm not mistaken, I'm hearing you say, you're out there on the front end, not too far ahead of the skis of where are we going? How is IoT, how is sensor-based technology going to mitigate risk, but also give you some of those amazing creature comforts of sleeping well at night because the building's not going to have its heat turned off because of a natural man-made event, if you will, or even a natural disaster. Sam, the Innovation Lab. Let's get these folks stoked about something exciting at GSA.
For sure, yeah. And I tell you what, being a user of the Workplace Innovation Lab that Chuck and the team developed for us in GSA, just tying together some of the themes that Ashlie and Chuck were talking about, I think what it's really helped is bring the information and the data to our fingertips to make sure these workspaces are fit for purpose, right? A lot of what Chuck and Ashlie were talking about, it's like, do you have the data to see utilization? Well, why are some spaces being utilized more than others, right? What configuration of spaces are being utilized more than others, right? Do people want beanbags in certain spaces, or your traditional office chairs and desks, right? That information gets fed into also potential noise pollution in certain areas, right? And before you incorporate solutions and spend the dollars, right, that digital twin enables you to at least, I know in the AI area, we like to have sandboxes where we test out capabilities, right, before we incorporate it fully to space. And we've even been able to incorporate things such as air quality, right? The assurance it gives me as a user of that space to make sure, right, that my employer is taking time to make sure, right, that air quality is a high standard, and things of that are covered. And before, if I had an issue with a space in the building, I used to have to get on Chuck's calendar, right? Well, not everyone can do that, right? Hey, Chuck, I really don't like this conference room setup. It's terrible, man, right? Or the furniture is uncomfortable, right? Now, as I use the space and the data is being recorded, it's kind of like getting on Chuck's calendar every day without getting on Chuck's calendar, right? Because him and his team are monitoring the space and the utilization of me as a user, and I'm giving feedback, right? If I go to a conference room over another, I'm saying, hey, this space really drives a lot of value and productivity with the way I work. The less I use a space, I'm giving him feedback on, hey, this space doesn't do that. So it's our ability to interact without necessarily having to do it the old school way, where I'm getting on Chuck's calendar and sending him an email, right, of how great the space is or how uncool the space is, so to speak. But literally, by me participating as a consumer of the space, I'm driving data that helps him create a space that's more amicable to the way I do work, and the people that I work with do work as well.
So Chuck, let me come back to you, because I'm seeing some questions which I love, and people didn't know it existed, and how do I access it? I think that's something I know my colleague Wayne, who's on this as well, as asked, and I'm like, I've never seen it myself, but I hear great things about it. So Chuck, maybe elaborate a bit more on this innovation lab, its purpose, but like how can people come see it, and what do they see when they get there?
Okay. Yeah, this started out, there's so much change going on in what we work with, both in technology and in furniture and in products that are out there. And so GSA wanting to continue to be at the lead, to let agencies try things, to look at things, to make decisions, informed decisions, back like I was talking about. So we reached out to industry and partnered with furniture manufacturers and technologists to come in and create demonstration areas of what they've got. So we didn't do the design. We said, you've got a X thousand square foot floor space here. Go do what you want to do here. And we gave them requirements, how many people we wanted to sit there and how many conference rooms, things like that. But you fit it out the way you want to do. No construction. We're not building walls or moving things. Just bring in what your product is and show it. Overlaid with technology with some of the vendors and what we could do, overlaid with booking systems and things like that tracked occupancy. And so we did that on the second floor of our headquarters building in 3 of the wings. And we had 5 vendors come in, and then we repurposed furniture within the building to show what it's like on a low cost, no cost of how can you use the stuff you got now and actually work with it. Overlaid a lot of technology. So as Ashlie was mentioning, pretty much everything became a sensor. The monitors are out there that you were checking in on was a sensor. The lighting was sensors. And so we were able to show to, as you checked in, to see what the temperature in a space was, what the humidity was, what the noise, ambient noise level was around those spaces, what the occupancy is when you're looking at a 10-person conference room with 2 people in it. And we were tracking all that. We opened it up to all federal employees. Anybody could come over and use it for free. In return, they had to pay us with a survey of their use and what was going on. So we collected a lot of rich data. And that was one of our partners within partnerships with industry, was they were letting us use this product for free during that time. In return, we were giving them the research back or the feedback that we got back on it. And we were getting a lot of great feedback coming from the visually impaired, or the hearing impaired or on accessibility issues of getting into a raised phone booth. And manufacturers started to retool some of their things and started to respond to that because they were hearing, well, this works great, except for, and then they was, okay, great, let's look at that. And so it allows agencies, and it's not designed to be, or the first version wasn't designed to be a set office. You're going to go, this would be great to work as an office. It was a little meant to be little vignettes of offerings. Here's what a conference room could look like. Here's what some desking areas could look like. Here's what a phone booth would look like. Here's what a four-person. And so agencies were able to bring their folks in, use it for a little bit of change management to go, hey, could you think you could work on something like this? So they could actually see it. But also now we would want to do this. So you're not going out and virally purchasing 100 of these things that look really cool in the brochure, and then find out nobody would ever use it. So being able to come over here, sit down for a day, a week, a month, and work here was a great value. We got a lot of great feedback from it. We had about, I think last count was like 7,000 folks coming through between individual reservations or meeting rooms that have come over the past year. We're currently in a retooling of it into our, because we want to keep it fresh. We want to keep bringing innovation in. So from January of 23 through January of 24, we had the vendors set up on the second floor. We now have a couple, one of the wings is still remaining open while we're retooling into the next variation of it up on our seventh floor, which will be the same kind of combination feel and working some of those lessons learned of how do we keep it fresh even during the year. That's how fast change is going, because what we found out in this first version of it is some of the vendors came in and swapped out stuff midstream based on what they're hearing. Nobody's sitting in this area. Do we have some other product we can bring in and try it out? And so there's all those kind of learnings that were going on, all within earshot and sight shot of the folks that were using it to say, hey, they're actually listening to us. This would work well for that. And so all that kind of stuff is the innovation lab. I think the more we get those kind of places, and again, small, but give people some knowledge of what they're getting into and show them the value of it. And then also the learnings of what it's not doing, being able to be responding to those.
Yeah,
I'm going to
Ashlie,
jump in. I'm going to jump in. Verizon also has, and in conjunction with the GSA, has invested considerably in our partnership ecosystem, because we know we can't do it all. Like when people think of Verizon, they think of our cell phones, they think of the retail stores, and how we've moved further and further into that 5G ecosystem and gathering that partnership network. We have innovation labs in DC, in Boston, and if you're in the Boston one, man, that blew my socks off when I walked through it. It's 3 floors, and each one of them have different setups that they're constantly adding partnerships. As mentioned, the industry is moving consistently. As 5G becomes more and more accessible, as massive IoT becomes an active conversation. When I say massive IoT, we're talking sensor densification. And what does that do to a building who has, a Wi-Fi network and its capabilities of Wi-Fi? As you add more sensors into that, it's going to clog the network. So the conversation becomes, how can you leverage not only a public a Wi-Fi capability, but also that private 5G or that private network that allows you a tighter ring on security as you're bringing in more innovation. And as you're scaling your sensors, what's that going to do to clog the network? You can imagine what, thousands of sensors bringing all this data in, along with employees in their laptops and people in and out of buildings, how that becomes very complex, and making sure that critical infrastructure. One of the examples that I think about in my head is what we've done at the Veterans Administrations, and understanding, like, as you're performing a surgery, you certainly want to give priority to the network in a surgical facility versus maybe a guest Wi-Fi. And the sensors that come in and drop in that environment, how critical it is to understand that priority for sensor densification. And some of the things that we've done in our innovations, and I know the GSA teams have been through that, because we've heard a lot of that feedback and how we've started to evolve the innovation centers and seeking out partners that can come in and fill in critical gaps as technology is constantly evolving.
Yeah, just to add on to that really quickly. I mean, one thing for the Innovation Lab, keeping it federal gets us focused on federal issues. So
Yep.
You would think a booking system would be simple, but you're dealing with, for us, multiple agencies all on different systems that don't let certain things come in. So instead of going to an app model, we went to a URL that everybody could access. So you start to solve some things in ways that can operate cross government. When you look at the wireless we use, all those kind of things ended up initially presenting a challenge just because of the structure of the individual agencies within government and different CIOs, but there was a solution in the middle somewhere that you could find and navigate to. And that's some of the learnings we've got through this. We have moved toward co-working. We're prototyping 6 co-working facilities across government, and the same kind of conversations is how do you do this in a way where you start running these shared facilities, shared federal facilities with multiple agencies in there coming in and accessing the same kind of technology and not having to put in redundant systems so you can keep everybody happy. So all those learnings are going on, but there's typically a solution once you start looking at and piloting them.
So let me do this for the audience. First of all, I love it. And we could talk for obviously hours on 5G and AI and technology and that sort of thing. And let me just say this, and I know Sam would appreciate it too. First of all, Ruth Starr and Rodney, we're loving your questions. So while I'm talking, maybe Chuck and Ashlie want to point some folks in the right direction, but it's great to see folks interested in this lab. And, I'm a believer in, the government through its process from the Hill to the whoever's in president seat to OMB, there's usually a requirement or a memorandum that comes out. But some of the resources for our audience that I would ask that you revisit are Executive Order 14057, specifically Section 205, which addresses achieving net zero emissions, buildings, campuses, and installations, chock full of technology requirements, leveraging cloud and data and all, but ultimately to achieve those net zero goals. It's really important to think about these stretch goals that you may say, well, I'm not going to be here, but what you're doing as a technology provider, whether it's buildings or water treatment facilities, what have you, that's the mission. And Ashlie nailed it with the sensor densification so that we can keep our water, our air, and our health. Think telemedicine, folks. Things like that's the innovation and saving lives. It's better for humanity. So that, and then I want to give a shout out to the Climate Smart Building Initiative CSBI tool. I believe it's still in beta version. There are the Centers for Emerging Building Technologies, Climate Action and Sustainability, the Federal Sustainability Plan that has climate adaptation and plans and requirements on agencies. Please look at those again and see where you can help meet the mission with your technology solution. So with that, Sam, let me jump back to you. I hit on a few, but there's many more. Is there anything you want to add regarding agencies today are under the requirement to meet sustainability goals?
Yeah, I definitely want to tie this into sustainability from a perspective of, I think that someone just put in the comment that is there a workplace innovation lab in San Francisco? And my answer to that is, and Chuck would probably agree, anywhere there's a federal building, there should be a workplace innovation lab, right? Part of sustainability is gaining efficiencies, right? And gaining efficiencies is, right, co-work spaces have been a concept that's not new to industry, right? Why should co-work spaces be a concept that's new to government? And I think one of the innovative things Chuck did and the team did was, as he said, we opened it up to every single federal agency, not just GSA employees. And what that helped us do is not only increase our ability to gain sustainability from a perspective of having a space that can be utilized across the board to its optimal ability by everyone, but also in the tools we had available, as Chuck alluded to, we were able to minimize the clicks it would take you to get things done. And I know that maybe there's a lot of agencies out there that are using a lot of third-party tools, et cetera, or just the ability to be productive in a space could be complex, right? I think about like a simple use case, like reserving a conference room, right? I know, Chuck, we're not the only agency potentially that has a third-party software to do that. Well, in the Workplace Innovation Lab, we were able to integrate that all into scheduling an invitation on your calendar and reserving your conference room into one, right? So minimizing the clicks has been a part of productivity and also sustainability for us within our space as well.
Let me tell the group now, and Nancy Delanoche, wonderful Nancy, if folks want to, we can, bring them off mute. If there's a question, I'm seeing them come in. We'll do it with the whole raise hand and try to get to those that we can and can't. So let's do that. If you have a question for one of our guests, and again, Ruth Starr, I appreciate your question. So take a look at those, both Ashlie and Chuck. I think they'd be interesting responses. I want to just, again, build off as folks are figuring out how to ask that question, or what's the process for getting into those questions. You always want to follow the money. And all I did was found 3 links when I did a search today on buildings and IoT and smart cities. I see 22.7 million GSA awards for electrification of the Ronald Reagan building. Biden-Harris administration, $1 billion through investing in America to make federal buildings cleaner and more energy efficient. And lastly, the IRA provides $3.4 billion for GSA-Public building service. You follow the money, it's probably because there's a mission and it needs technologies. For all of our friends who sell into the government, there's plenty of money out there. Comments on any of the ones I mentioned, Chuck, since they were talking a lot about PBS, but floor is yours.
No, there is a lot of opportunity. As our administrator likes to say, we have both money and momentum. And so we want to move forward, and again, in a deliberate, smart way, but also to push industry in the right way, to get and try those things in ways that make sense. And the 3 that you just mentioned are absolutely kind of indicative of where we're heading. When you look at, again, another quote she likes to say is demos, not memos. So let's go out and try stuff. Let's try it fast. Let's figure out what's working, what's not. Let's adjust and then move on. And I think that kind of mindset will get us where we need to go, because there is a lot of innovation going on. Ruth's question about the blind access to our booking systems and our rentals, that was actually raised by somebody that came and visited it, and it was fed back to the providers to say, how can we start addressing some of these issues? And so all those, we're not thinking of everything right now, but we certainly are listening and hearing it and figuring out how can we react to it? How can we start to change this? Because if anything is certain over the last few years, is change has always been constant, but change is now more rapid. And in real estate, we're used to kind of 10-year steps. You put in place a lease, and 9 years later, you go back and ask them how it was and start planning for the next 10 years. And it's no longer that. We're into the probably 24-month kind of sequence of change and adaptation and the flexibility we need. And so when we look to put in and spend the money that you noted there, it's all focused on that. How do we create agile, flexible space that will last for the next many years, and how do you do that in a smart way?
Ashlie, can I just come to you, because I have to think about, I remember when the building, the CNN building, I think it was, back in my days when we retrofitted for the IP telephony, and it was like, well, it's a new building, it's easier to do it. What about these legacy buildings? And we're hearing and seeing in the news, there's a lot of still vacant buildings, but maybe just putting that out there, what do you say to people that says, hey, it doesn't always have to be a new building with new technology, you can retrofit?
Yeah, it starts small, right? And I usually say this to at least the sales folks that I talk with, and to keep the customer, keep the focus on the problem, right? What are you looking to solve? You could go out there and just start throwing technology at the wind to solve things, but keeping focus on the problem. So if your number one problem is supporting somebody who's visually impaired, think about wayfinding. Think about use cases that support, audible wayfinding and leveraging a building's floor map, where it might be an app that they're visually hearing left, right, versus, considering throwing in a technology that kind of supports one specific use case. The other thing, the beauty thing about IoT that I find passionate about is the fact that you can start small, right? You can focus on one problem and you can come in and solve that. And then you can come in and solve another one and another one. You don't need to think about IoT like you think about installing an IT network, right? It's not one and done, it's stackable. So maybe your first use case is monitoring HVAC units and you want to focus on HVAC units. Installing, creating a POC, understanding the data, and then scaling it. Sometimes you find that maybe I need to understand the vibration on a compressor, and that's a different use case. Or maybe even in air quality, you're concerned about particle matter or oxygen level or different types of data. And then thinking about how the data stacks on top of each other, because they're not just, I see a chart with a temperature monitor. No, it's how do I see temperature with humidity on top of air medical on, on a sunny day or a cloudy day, and how that data starts to tell a story. And it's pulling that story out that creates efficiency. So think of it, you can start with a small use case, or you can be, I'm building a brand new building, I got to think about everything. So it's flexible.
I love it. We're closing up the time, and obviously I want to get in these parting shots. So that is a simple, what do you want to leave with the audience? We can, again, I think we put a sampling out there of folks. We gave resources. We hope our audience, takes a look at some of this, these requirements and mandates and understand that it's not just a engineering architecture thing, but we saw the inner technologist in Chuck clearly show itself, and then Ashlie, brilliant with just making the concept of communications be more than something that, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Sensor, I loved your sensor densification. So I'm going to steal that and give credit to you. And then of course, Sam, being the ambassador you are for all things excellence in government, we appreciate that. So why don't we start, Sam, with you? What's something that you took away you want to leave the audience and encourage them in a call to action?
For sure. Yeah, I think primarily about the diffusion of innovation, right? And if you look at the diffusion of innovation on a bell curve, there's early adopters, then there's the folks that adopt technology or innovation when it's mainstream, and then there's late adopters. And I think we could all agree traditionally it's been government's role to be mainstream or late adopters. And I think what Chuck and the PBS team has proven is that we could be early adopters as well. And so if your industry and you have innovative use cases that really can bring value to the table, as Pete said, follow the money. We have resources and we have interests. And we want to be early adopters as well, especially in the space of sustainability and advancing smart buildings for the workplace of the future. So if you have ideas, we're all ears, right? Come and collaborate with us, join some of these industry days, join some of these panels like this one right here, Pete, that you put together. And thanks, Pete, for all the hard work you've been doing around this space. But you're in the right place. We want to hear from everyone and hopefully start moving and shifting government to early adopters in a lot of these critical technologies.
Love it. I see Rodney jumping in with ideas. We want ideators, Rodney. Ashlie, parting shot.
I would say that some of the beauty that we see is being able to share knowledge across industries. As we focus in utilities and get tighter and tighter on their use cases, how do you leverage that over in retail? And how does, if somebody's walking into a building and wanting to perform an action, how do you cross collaborate across multiple industries to start really narrowing in on best case use cases? That's been something that was an eye-opener that IoT started to really do, from the Super Bowl and crowd control all the way into how an airport facilitates, taking the learnings that we're finding across all of these different industries and making it best practices is an area where we're focused on.
Appreciate that big time. Chuck, bring us home. Parting shot, buddy.
Yeah, for me, it's just providing a voice and providing solutions. And so from the suppliers on the call, tell us what you got, tell us what you're doing, tell us what you're thinking so we can start considering that. And from the end users, the agencies on the call, tell us what some of the gaps are, some things we got to look at solving kind of thing. If we can hear that, we can work together to come up with those solutions. And then just amplifying what Ashlie said is, this is stackable. This is things where you can take, okay, let's solve that one here, let's solve that one there, and find people with that passion and that intellect around that and start solving these little things one at a time and then collectively together integrating. So I think the opportunity's there. We just got to hear from everybody on what are some of those solutions and what are some of those needs, and we can work on it.
Okay, wonderful. My parting shot was I heard this voice of the customer, Ashlie, well stated. Obviously, the ultimate collaborator and Sam Navarro, door is always open. And then Chuck, I appreciate, just the idea of like sharing the art of the possible, and that it isn't just a brick and mortar discussion. So listen, folks, facts tell, stories sell. Mentor told me that once, and thank you for being storytellers today. And my parting shot is I would like to say I'm going to get a selfie of us because I believe there is a story behind every selfie, and I will be honored if you just give me a smile on 3. 1, 2, 3. Done. Okay, Chuck, Sam, Ashlie, thank you. Thank you. Anybody who was on this call, make sure you reach out to these folks. This was a meeting. You had an hour. More importantly, stay in touch. Embrace open government. Thank you to my friends at ACT-IAC. And I don't know if I'm handing it back to Fred, but close us out, buddy.
Hey, thank you so much. It was such a great event, and really learned a lot of things here. So yeah, you guys have all a great day, and thank you again, Pete and Sam, and all the panel.
Talk to you soon, Fred. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.